Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. I am feeling so nostalgic and it's kind of the theme of my channel anyway, really. It's like nostalgia, but I like to take you on those nostalgia journeys with me because I really want you to feel like you're there. Not only that, but it works as like the best possible pep squad to get you out and doing these things as well, because I know I hear it so much in my comments, and I've heard it from the very beginning that, oh, that's so amazing. I wish I could have experienced that, because you seem to think that there was this sort of time and space that was created and then it's just completely disappeared and blown into oblivion and it can no longer happen again. And I'm here to tell you that could not be further from the truth. So I want to tell you some stories about when I first got involved in Goth specifically, because I started off with just kind of like your regular alternative stuff. I was your like, your alternatine listening to grunge and stuff, but then it moved into Goth. Some things that I covered before, but you're not, like those of you who are new, you're not much in the way of back watchers with regards to content. So I'm going to take you there here and now. Let's just go there here and now. So when I first got involved in the subculture, what first struck me being the music. And the thing about the music is the time that I got involved, I think the people in the 80s would have a much different perception than I did, because around the 90s is when they kind of installed the romance portion of it. And that's when things started really getting romantic. You had more ethereal showing up. You had more sort of melodic synth-based and poetic things coming into play, because in the 80s things were very much still hardcore influenced by its punk roots. But then as we went toward the 90s, that's when it really started becoming its own thing and separating, but still keeping that same spirit. And that's when, like I said, the whole romance thing was introduced. And the best representation of that I always seem to kind of am drawn to is Faith in the Muse. And there's so many more, but for me, that's just mine. We all have our like tried and trues. We all have our staples. We all have that one band that just gets us, or the thing that hits that nostalgia button. And for me, that's Faith in the Muse. So once that romance was sort of installed into the whole thing, that's when really I got involved anyway. So I got there when it was just rife with romance, and it created a scenario. And it, like I've said this so many times, but when you're a teenager, you're dramatic as it is. We everything is just 10 times worse than it should be. And we maximize one thing, we minimize another, but regardless, it's always going to be blown out of proportion in the most dramatic fashion you could possibly imagine. And we were no exception. And you add Goth to the mix, especially around this period. You just have to look at the baby bats themselves. Baby bats, and you remember being one. You're either one now or you were one in the past, and just remembering those days and remembering how it was, everything was so much bigger than it was. And there was so much emphasis placed on all these different things that seemed so important, but nowadays you're like, the hell was I thinking? You had that imposter syndrome that a lot of us, we really did have, because no matter how hard we tried, we somehow felt like we were pretending. Even though we knew in our hearts that we weren't, we just had a lot to live up to. And whereas today, a lot of those negative aspects are coming into play. A lot of people who are naysaying, a lot of people who are calling you a poser and imposing all these crazy rules. They're real people. They're not correct. They're not right. They're just jerks. But back when I first got started, those voices were coming from us. It was our own self-conscious brain kind of naysaying us and telling us that what we were doing was wrong. And it all just came from a place of insecurity and really wanting to be part of something. And that's really what it was all about. It was always just wanting to be part of something and not feeling like we were good enough. And that just comes with the territory of being a teenager. I think in any aspect comes along with any subculture, anything that you want to be involved in. We always have that self-consciousness about us. I even want to expand on that, not even just being a teenager, but just a baby bat in general, because baby bats can be in their 20s, 30s, 40s. You're just getting started. It doesn't really have an age on it. You're just getting started. Sometimes you have those feelings of insecurity or feeling like you're not good enough. which couldn't be furthest from the truth. The only way that you could potentially even come close to doing it wrong is to not listen to the music, because that's where it all began, and that's where it began for me. It was just this incredible chain reaction when I first got involved, because listening to the music, and I've done videos like this where I let fashion be determined by the music that I'm listening to, and it's just so true, because fashion, and I've said this so many times, fashion does not a goth make. It's not the end all be all. It's definitely a part of the subculture. It's a big part of the subculture because it's how we express ourselves, but it's not something that's going to determine your worth or your place within the subculture. But being involved and getting involved as, you know, as a young teen, the way that I did, listening to the music, it created this atmosphere. And you expanded from there. You're listening to this music, and I'm just going to go to my very first video here, Faith in the Muse Sparks. You're listening to this, and in your mind, it creates this huge atmosphere. It creates a scene, whether you're in a cemetery at night, whether you're just walking the catacombs somewhere, whether a space where it's very much your own, your bedroom, where you've decorated it to the way that you wanted. I always wanted black and white checkered tile floors, candelabras and gargoyles. That was my thing. And this atmosphere that you created was very much connected to the music. And going further, your clothing reflected that. And it happened very much inadvertently, at least for me, because it just seemed like this natural progression, because I not only wanted to be part of that environment, I didn't want to exist in this environment that reflected the music that I listened to, that affected me on this huge level, but I wanted to be immersed in an atmosphere that reflected the music as well, which meant the people and the space. But I also wanted to become one with that space and embody that. I wanted to present myself in a way that reflected the music that I was listening to, and it was in no way false. And I did have moments where I looked at the elders and sometimes felt the pressure to look like that, but again, that pressure came from me. What I was experiencing and what I was feeling from listening to the music was presented physically. And I would go to the thrift stores all the time looking for these things. It wasn't a matter of shopping in these big name stores or like shopping online the way that it is today. Going into the thrift store, you were really just looking for these bits and pieces that you could put together, and they really were a representative of who you were and how you were feeling. And in my mind, I always looked to the past, because when I listened to the music, it always took bits and pieces from the past, and the bits that I focused on were the 1920s era, very much deco, because to me that was very spooky to me. You know, you had the silent film era, and a lot of it was very much hammed up, but you look at films like Metropolis, there's an undeniable darkness about it. You look at actresses, the silent film era stars, and the first one comes to mind, and I'm sure you probably all know Louise Brooks. I had my hair cut like that, but if you were to look at her, she's somebody that many within the subculture around that time modeled themselves after. Look at Theda Bara, the vamp. And that was something that I very much would kind of attach myself to. But not just that, with little bits and pieces of Edwardian here and Victorian here. I smoked cloves at the time. And oh my God, when they say scent is the closest sense tied to memory, it's so true. Because when we wanted to embody that atmosphere, it was on all sides. Scent very much had a huge stake in it. No vampire pun intended. But cloves will immediately bring me back. Things like cloves, patchouli, Egyptian musk, and there is a scent that I've been on the lookout for. If you can find it, please point it in my direction. It is Angel Dreams by a company called Airs. Now they've remade it and rebranded. It's not the same. This bottle was round and flat, and the scent Angel Dreams was mine. That was very much my scent. And if I smell these things, if I smell angel dreams, if I smell cloves, if I smell patchouli, Egyptian musk, any of these things will immediately bring me back to that time and space. So all of these things, these scents, the atmosphere, the clothing that we created for ourselves, and then of course the thing that inspired it all, the music, when you put those things together, what it did to you mentally was incredible. And it's something that I will forever hold on to and remember. And there are people nowadays, and I kind of laugh because it just shows who the true people are that are involved in the subculture and who the ones that are adopting it just to be cool and kind of make a quick buck are. Anybody that tells you that the goth scene is dead does not listen to the music, because all you would need to do is take a look at Bandcamp, subscribe, go on Bandcamp, pick a bunch of bands that you like and then a bunch of adjacent ones and watch your inbox blow up. If you ever wanted a good indicator of how the goth subculture is doing, look at the music. Look who's touring. Look who's making music. Look at how many bands are getting involved and look at all the people that are getting involved. I mean, sure, you have these little parasites that kind of attach themselves onto it because it's like the alternative, edgy, cool thing du jour, but with everything, it's fads. It's fads with these people. It comes and it goes. So I don't want you to hear somebody tell you that the goth scene is dead and you say, oh, okay, let me go and just find something else. I promise you it's huge. So get on Bandcamp, get a good listen, and you could really get a good idea of what's going on. But when I first got involved, when I say the drama, and we put it on a lot of the time because we were kids. Going along with the drama, clove cigarettes. I smoked clove cigarettes at the time. But do you think smoking a black cigarette was enough? No. I had to have the extender, the cigarette holder that was like this long, because why not? My purse was a little metal case like they used in the 1920s, a little clip. It doubled as a weapon. But I miss this thing so much. It was like this metal case clipped closed. I kept everything in it. It was maybe a little bit bigger than a clutch. I got that at Rainbow Shops of all places as well. And I had my birdcage veil cut halfway. I did my little spit curls here. And that was kind of my look. That was my thing. And that's the thing about it, because I wasn't doing it because I wanted to impress anyone else. The reason that I was doing it is because I didn't want to only be a reflection of the way that the music was making me feel and how it was inspiring me, but I wanted to be one with my environment, and it felt natural. And again, sometimes there was that pressure to look like the elders around you. As a baby bat, you always have that pressure, but once you find your footing, that soon fades. Again, back to that drama. So I must adjust to tell you the story. Going back to the drama, the whole drama aspect of it, and really emphasizing the whole romance aspect of it, because as a teenager, you're boy crazy, you're girl crazy, and you add this whole new dark romance to the whole thing. Let me tell you, the poetry that came out of us, the art, even people who weren't particularly inclined toward these things, they still tried, not because they felt like they had to. Maybe some of them did, but it was just so instinctive, because when you're first becoming involved, there are a lot of cultural aspects that come along with goth. And this was back then, and it's not something that's emphasized today, which is sad, but there was a great emphasis put on things like intelligence, artistic ability, being well read, and also knowing a bit of history as well. That was incredibly important. Just knowing all of these things, being informed, being intelligent, having different cultural values, these were very much a part of the subculture, because you would see people deep in discussion. And I oftentimes, as a young baby bat, I felt like an idiot, because I'm in ninth grade, and I'm 15, I'm 16 years old, and I'm involved in this, and I'm trying really hard, but there's just so much knowledge that one can attain. And I'm talking like going back to like days of the card catalog. in the library because the internet was sparse when it came to information, and it was difficult. So a lot of the things that I knew, a lot of the things that I've learned, even when it came to, say, literary suggestion, but a lot of what I learned, my vocabulary, even like becoming as expansive as it had at a young age, had nothing to do with school. And I'm not saying drop out of school, but what I'm saying is it was through being part of the subculture. And there's good and bad that comes with those things. And if you're congregating with a fake ID like I was, people assume that you're their age, or they see you on their turf and they think, okay, fair game. There have been times that I was hit on by older guys. Was it because I was putting myself into an environment where I wasn't exactly old enough to be in? Oh yeah, absolutely. But those incidents were really few and far between, and most times when they found out your age, they were like, "The fuck are you doing in here?" When I was 16, I got a boyfriend who was 21 at the time. And, was he buying me alcohol at the clubs? And the thing is, I was never really a big drinker. It was never really my thing. But sometimes I just had it ornamentally, and I even did this at parties in my early years in high school. I would just hold the red Solo cup, or I would hold the 40. Yes, they drank 40s. They were disgusting. I did not like them. They were not for me, but I would just hold it. And every now and again, I'd tip some out. And it was stupid now that I think about it, because I was just essentially trying to be like everyone else, and I felt like, the dorky kid that's, oh, you don't drink? No, and that's not a bad thing. Honestly, truth be told, the only time I ever really actually drank, the very first time that I'd ever gotten drunk was 2006. And that was awful. I do not recommend that to anybody, and I've never been that way since. It's gross. Now, to other people, if you can hack it, by all means, go forth. But as for myself, my two main ethnicities, they do not correspond well with drinking. One, I'm East Asian. Two, I'm Italian. We're not good drinkers. You give me like the slightest bit. My sister's even worse. And within the goth clubs, there were definitely illegal substances going on. I never personally saw it, and I think that it's probably a good thing, because I am, my being involved in the subculture, it was a great escape for me, because it felt safe. It felt like my home. And my home, literal home with my parents, was filled with drugs and instability. So why would I want to go and seek out a place that was my safe haven and have that be the thing? So I'm glad that I never actually saw it taking place. So, and I'm also glad that I was never offered anything. And I think that a lot of people who knew me and understood the kind of person that I was knew that offering me anything would never result in anything positive, because I would not have the best reaction, and I might just punt you across the room if you tried. Not my thing. But that always made me the designated friend that spoke to parents or authority figures when need be, because I was always the guaranteed sober one. I never begrudged my friends the time to experiment, because kids experiment, they do it all the time. But for me, I didn't need to. Given my environment and the way that I grew up, I knew. It's like, you don't need to experiment when you have your control and variable in your home. You're living, sleeping, breathing it. You don't need to experience it yourself. You're watching it, you're witnessing it, and you're like, yep, I don't want that. And I didn't. And it didn't go that way. And very happy that I didn't. Because I also wonder, if I had, would I had the experiences that I had? Would it have been so beautiful and wonderful? Kind of teetering, going off in little tangents, but I want to talk about that drama. So the drama existed in everything from the way that we would dress up when we would go out. It was the way that we would form our mixtapes, because your mixtape, when you put together a mixtape, no, we did not have CD players in our cars, it was tapes. When you had your mixtape, it wasn't you just throwing on a bunch of songs that you happen to like. There was a succession of events that were happening each song. Your tape, side A, side B, they told a story, and it was like progressing into something. If we had a thing for someone, if we really liked someone and we gave them a mixtape, you pay attention because it told a story. We were just like spewing out our emotions and our feelings into this little plastic cassette. And if you didn't have anything to say about it, that was like instant crush, instant heartbreak. Even the artwork that we did on the little jacket that went in, there was a lot. There was a lot that went into that. My house was always the house that we went to because it was like the most permissive. Like we just were, everyone was just allowed there. We smoked in my room. And yes, I did smoke cigarettes. I do not smoke cigarettes anymore, but I'm not one of the reformed smokers. But it was the 90s, you know, still in the wake of the 80s where you could literally smoke in hospitals. So that kind of thing wasn't as frowned upon. My friends would come over and we would pile on. I had a full-size bed, and if you're curious about that, it's like a scotch smaller than a queen, and everybody would pile into my room, loads of people. And how we did this, we would put on the most macabre and just melancholy goth music that you could possibly imagine. Open all the windows, even if it was dead of winter, because we were smoking, and everybody would lay on my bed listening to this music and just fucking staring. We would stare. We bring back the art of disassociating. We would lay sprawled out in my bed, smoking cigarettes, utterly disassociating. Lights were off. It was dark. Sometimes you had like candles or incense going, but for the most part, it was dark. The only light in that room was the moonlight coming through. We were sprawled out on my bed, just utterly disassociating. And we even did that when we would go out in cars, because that was another way we disassociated. Thank God the driver didn't do that. We would get in a car, which was usually owned by my friend Dawn. It was the size of a boat, because you got to remember your first car is going to be a really old car. And if your first car, you're getting it in the 1990s, your car is going to be from the 80s. And those cars were just huge, which worked out for us because you can fit 500 of us inside. And you would have us all clad in black, smoking cloves, looking melancholy, listening to this mixtape that was probably put out by mostly Cleopatra tracks. And Cleopatra back then was golden. Cleopatra nowadays, I don't know what it's doing, but back then, if you got a Cleopatra goth sample disc, you knew you were getting something good. So we would heavily rely on like the Cleopatra label. We had 4AD, we had Metropolis. There was some good labels out there. There was Wax Trax. So we would put together all of these amazing songs and we would just drive and disassociate. The art of disassociation was real. We didn't have a phone to look at, but there was something so comforting in that because we were doing it collectively. We were with each other. If you've stayed this long, there's a story that I'm going to tell you. And it was about the very first gothic romance that I had ever experienced. And I was 16. His name was Davey. And he ran a goth night called Subversion. And we had a lot of different goth nights that would open and close all through the area. And Subversion was a new one, and we were really excited about this one. The alternative crew in my high school was pretty big, and the goth and industrial kids, there was a lot of us. And we talked about this all week. We were stoked. We could not wait to go to Subversion. And I remember at the time, I was working my first job. I was working Burger King. And working in Burger King, my mother would come in every now and again to visit me. And I remember I gave her my paycheck. I had just gotten it cashed. And I said, I'm not going to have time because I was working the Saturday, and that night we were going to Subversion. And I said, I need your help because this is what I need from you. I remember in Rainbow Shops, which was no more than 5 minutes up the road, there was this dress that they had. It was a long black lace dress. It was a tank top dress, square neck. Everything back then was all about the square neck, but square neck, tank top dress, black lace, and it had a underlay. And I had plans for that underlay. But what I needed from her is I said I needed you to go get this dress. I can't believe she did this too because she would never do shit like this for me. But she went to CVS and I wanted the CoverGirl Noxzema Clean, the palest shade they had, foundation with the powder. And I needed a black liquid eyeliner. She got it. She got it for me. When I got home from work, it was there. And I was like, oh my God. I took a shower. I'm getting ready. And all my friends are over. Like everyone's there. Every item of clothes that everyone has ever owned, including their CDs, are piled high on my bed, and we're listening to music. And that was our form of pre-gaming. Like, we were ecstatic. We could not wait to go to Subversion. It was in Stony Brook. We were freaking stoked. So the first thing I did was, I'm cutting the underlay of this dress because I want you to be able to see the boots underneath. It's a black lace dress, but it had this like little rayon underlay, and I cut that short. And I wore fishnets with it, and I was wearing 20-hole Doc Martens because back then that was the thing, the 20-hole Doc Martens. I didn't have anything cool yet, like Pikes or platform shoes, not yet. Straightened my hair. I had a short bob, and of course my dog collar. I think it was a cat collar, but it was tiny. It was leather. It had the studs on it, and I drilled a little hole in it, and I hung this cross from it. And then of course the rosary beads with it, and then the liquid eyeliner. And eyebrows that you spent like 2 seconds on because the 90s eyebrows were not it. Draw them on, and it was mostly circular shaped as well. It was kind of like rounded, like little Ronald McDonald going on there. But it worked, fortunately, for the time. Red lipstick, had my boots on, could not wait. We were like in the car, and I would get the pre-club anxiety, and we all did. But it was like these butterflies in your stomach. It was a good nervous. It was a good anxious, but we're just peeing ourselves with like anxiety. We get to Subversion, and we see that there's like, we're a little bit late. There's a little bit of a line outside the door, but not a lot. Walk up to the building, and there's like a door, and then there's stairs that go up, you could see, and there's somebody outside waiting. They're looking at like ID. Even though it's a teen night, it was a teen club, teen goth night. So the first thing I hear as I approach the door is the song Sideshow by The Wake. And that's like one of my anthems. Like, it's one of those songs that gets me like keyed up, and I'm like, okay, anxiety gone, I'm ready. And we go up, and there's a bunch of different people there from different parts of the subculture that are a little bit older than us and from different parts of Long Island. So we see them there, and they're like, you know, we stay within our group because we're like, who are you? Plus we were the youngest ones there. And then I see him. I see Davey. And this Davey was my very first sort of gothic romance. And he was 18. And it was not an abnormal thing for people who are like 18, 17 to acquire a club night, because you would just kind of approach the venue, say, I want to do this thing, and they would let you do it. I don't know if that would fly nowadays, but back then it was not abnormal. So it was Davey and his friend Nicholas, who was here on exchange from Australia. So when I got to the top of those stairs, I got into the room, and everything just sort of washed over me. I'm looking at the environment. There's candelabras, there's black curtains, there are just a sea of people. This creates this entire atmosphere, and it just, as it washes over you, I'm going to try my best to articulate what that feels like. Think about the most darkest fantasy film that you've ever seen or book that you've ever read that gives you not just butterflies in your stomach, but it makes you feel like you're in the best dream that you've ever had. That's what it feels like. It's like you're stepping one foot into fantasy while staying rooted in reality, because it's something that I always tried to point out and really emphasize, is that it really was like a fantasy being involved, but it was the safest fantasy that you could ever be involved in, because we were still realists. We knew what the real world was. We knew what it entailed. We weren't sort of cosplaying as something and just pretending to be in this fantasy world and then, you know, leaving and being like, okay, back to reality. I'm going to put on my khakis and go bake cookies with mom. And I think that's why we got a lot of the flack that we did. I mean, we were still very much in the wake of Satanic Panic in the 90s. And that was one of the things that I was not expecting, is how quickly I was referred to as a freak, or how easily I was gawked at. And I wasn't just gawked at, but I had horrible things shouted at myself, at my friends. And it's amazing what grown-ass adults could look at kids and say to them nasty, horrible things. They'll even put their hands on you. These are people that have their own kids. And you would think, how would I feel if somebody did that to my kids? But they were perfectly fine doing it to us, because in their mind we were like these subhuman things. So that was very new to me. So that is something that kind of very much kept you rooted in reality, but it was also something that was a good way to weed out the people who genuinely were involved because they loved it and it was who they were, and the ones who weren't. Because the ones who weren't, they weren't about to put up with that. They're like, screw that, I'm going back to the Gap. But for everyone else, just, you dealt with it. You endured it because you weren't about to give up the person that you are in order to escape the bullshit, which was like everyday life. And they made media out of it. They were talk shows where they had us on, and they brought us on with the guise of wanting to know more about us, but it turned out to be like an ambush. You've seen it. Again, the things that they felt like they could say to people, not just people, but underage people, and get away with it was pretty freaking insane. That in itself really kept that other foot firmly gripped in reality. And living that fantasy was something we realized was just very much part of who we were. We were whimsical people. We were creative people. We were listening to music that was evocative, that was creative, and it did inspire us to do more, to aspire to more. And I will forever be appreciative and eternally grateful to not just Goth, but the people involved that enriched me the way that they did. It was very validating to know that, it's not just a fantasy, this is who we are. So I made myself a regular at this club, Subversion, and it did not take long for Davey and I to play the game. And I'll talk about the game because it's pure, it's always about the drama. It's pure drama. It's like you're young baby bats and you're newly involved, so it's all about that drama. So the first night I went, we locked eyes immediately, and we're just sort of like, stealing glances every now and again, but we're never talking to each other. He's the host of the night, so he's talking to people. So coming over and talking to people in my group, but not me. And I'm like, all right, you two can play this game. So this went on. And then eventually we started talking. Subversion sort of became our event. It became our thing. And then we exchanged phone numbers and we would talk on the phone. Then we hung out outside Subversion, but it was always in groups. So we would go to, this is an area where they found a lot of dead bodies. There was a serial killer kind of operating there. So there was like Lido Beach. But it was nice. Drive with the windows down. It was summertime, and we would just pile in Dawn's car and we would listen to the most melancholy music that you can imagine. That was just, it was so indicative to like our personalities and just the overall energy of the night. And we would just drive. Mildly cringy, we really were with the dramatics, because in a lot of ways we were still very much learning, and we felt like we had to be, because again, you are so engrossed in this music, which in itself is quite dramatic. And we're dressing in a way that again, in itself, pretty fucking dramatic. And when you're kind of in that atmosphere and you get together in a group, you think you have to behave in that way as well, using the most expansive vocabulary that you can. So when you are having a casual conversation, when you would have a normal word that you would use, if you knew a word that was related to that word or still very much in context, you would go to the word with more IQ points than the simple word. You know what I mean? Like rather than say, oh, it's everywhere, you would say, it's ubiquitous. Drama. But from that moment that I saw Davey, and we began this whole dance, just dancing around each other, kind of congregating in each other's little circles, but never talking to each other, never addressing each other, but still sort of like, those moments, let me tell you, those moments were like the most exciting and exhilarating and just daydream worthy. I'm a Libra. I live for those kinds of moments. It progressed, and then he, at Subversion one night, he takes me to a curtain in the back. There's just these curtains up, these black curtains, and he pulls it back, and then there's an office door back there. There's a little bit more space, there are windows, and then there's the office door. I'm like, all right, this is interesting, but he's like leading me by the hand. Everything is like dramatic, so he's like leading me by the hand to this curtain, and he like pulls the curtain, and then ushers me into a freaking office with like a desk. I'm like, what the hell is this? We go through this dialogue, right? If you want the full story, I'm going to put a link to this video, and I kind of go through it. I did this 8 years ago, so you might find it like that much cringe. It's still like a great memory that I have, but still, depending on who you are. So he goes through the whole dance. He's like, I think you know what I want to ask you. And he's going to ask me out, to which he did. He asked me out. So I, of course, like being completely enamored of him, I say, absolutely, yes. You have no idea how many poems I've written about you at this point, which I didn't say out loud, but I did. So in the most hands stapled to forehead, oh so dramatic way, he puts both hands on the side of my face and kisses me in the most orchestrated fashion that it would be straight out of an Anne Rice novel. And it was, I melted into that moment. From the moment I went home, I relived that kiss over and over. I drew that kiss from every single angle. If my parents saw it, they would think I was on crack. And the room was different too. There was no desk or anything like that. There was like, the checkered floor and the gargoyles and the candelabras and stuff. Had to represent the moment. And from that moment on, we were attached at the hip, and we were going on long excursions with the groups, and we were always the ones sat together and just cuddling and kissing, and like teenagers do. But the reason that I'm telling you this story is because I feel like these are the aspects of Goth that are lost a lot on people, because I talk a lot about living in a digitized world and how vapid that can become, and how that can almost cause one to be somewhat apathetic in a lot of ways. Not advertently, not 100%, but in ways that you're kind of dulling those emotions and you're not experiencing it all. And when you say, oh, I wish I could have lived in that time in that place, what difference does it make? Why is now so different? What happened back then that couldn't happen today? In fact, we have more today. All you have to do is just turn some of these features off for a while. Go be with your friends. Have these moments. It completely is possible. Put your phones down and do these things. I say that as a person who always has their phone, but we found solace in each other. We found solace in the music. We found solace in the night. We found comfort in just complete and total disassociation, and we were fine. We didn't need a screen to stare at. If we did it, you can do it. And you have more at your disposal to make those sorts of things happen. Just do it safely. Do it safely. If you're young, keep your family informed so that they know that where you are and that you're okay. But these moments can absolutely be recreated. Those feelings can be recreated. And I don't want you to lose out on those experiences and all of those emotions associated, because those feelings associated with all of those things are a huge part of it. It's one thing to live it. It's one thing to see it. It's one thing to have yourself be seen and have the photos. Anybody can do that. But when you're fully immersed, you're in that moment and you're feeling everything associated, that doesn't just become committed to memory, it becomes etched in there like stone. And it's something that you will never get rid of, ever. Take pictures, but don't experience it through the lens. Don't experience it through this. You want to experience it here, you want to experience it here. Every now and again, take some pictures if that's what you need to do, but it's so important that you live in that moment. Experiencing it was everything. And to recreate these moments really are not as hard as it may seem. There was no magic time and space. It was just what we had at the time and what we worked with, and you have it now. Goth is thriving. It is thriving right now. And if you have friends that you're like, well, I want to go and do these things, but my friends aren't Goth, bring them. Bring them along. Watch my videos on how to turn your friends Goth. They love it. And if they don't want to turn, they'll be happy to come with you. They'll come. They'll do the things. They'll hang out. Because you don't want to miss out on these moments. You'll regret it. And sometimes it's hard to be wistful and nostalgic and miss something that you never experienced. But there are people who live in my comments. You don't live there, but who are in my comment section. And I hear you. I see you. And you say, how could I be so heartbroken and miss something that I've never experienced? It's because it's in there. It's because you have it. It's in you. Just got to get out and do it. And there's so much anxiety that comes nowadays because a lot of you grew up within technology. You grew up with the internet, you grew up with texting, you grew up with a lot of this stuff. So a lot of your memories are associated with playing games with your friends online, or texting them or talking to them in that way. We didn't have that. I used a rotary phone at some points. Have you ever used a rotary phone? I'm aging myself here, but yeah, I've used a rotary phone. I had a beeper at one point and I felt like super high tech. I was like, I could be in the movie Hackers. But that was very short-lived because someone stole my beeper. They stole it from a party that I had. It was on top of my microwave in my kitchen, and some bastard stole it. It was fun while it lasted. Some of these moments can simply be created by the perfect playlist that represents you, that represents the moment, that represents sort of the energy that you want, like the vibe that you want. Getting in a car with your friends doesn't even have to be a car. Go hang out at someone's house, put on the music, invite the right people, and just put the technology down. I know it's hard. Put it down, because this is a buffer. This is what stands between you and connecting to the other person. Because like I said, when we were disassociating, we were just feeling that. And I say this in the least a hippie way possible. We were just immersed and absorbed in each other's energy, listening to the music, because we knew that we were together, and that's all we needed. The simplest cure for boredom were just to add more people to the equation, and suddenly you weren't bored anymore. Imagine that. Imagine without phones. If you can put those down just for a little while, go for a drive with your friends, listen to the music together, drive with the windows down, and just feel, think, get involved in conversations. I think you will have an entirely different experience. If anybody tries to tell you that Goth is dead, this is a person that has absolutely, one, nothing to do with the subculture, and two, does not listen to the music. Because a great marker to know how your subculture is doing is to look and see what's coming out musically. There is music coming out by the dozen every day. Go sign up to Bandcamp. Go on Spotify. Go look around. Find new bands and then look for the adjacent bands and watch how many updates that you suddenly get. Because if Goth were truly dead, these bands would not only not be able to thrive, but they wouldn't be able to multiply. So I don't want you to see that, hear that, and be discouraged, because there is tons of music out there for you to listen to, and there is something for everyone. You will find your sound. It's not hard. You'll find it. It's there, I promise you. Because as we continue, as we go on, new subgenres are being made. You have like dark wave mixed with synth pop, mixed with cold wave, mixed with a little bit of death rock, just thrown all together. And you have so many different things that it's impossible to have something that doesn't appeal to somebody, even the hardest critic. You'll find something. Just remember those things. Remember that these things are not difficult to recreate. If we were able to do it once, that means we can do it again. There is nothing stopping you. So if you need help, ask me, ask in the comments. There are elders that have been there. Look at my older videos. I have tons of tips. But with that, I'm going to leave you with the inspiration and hope beyond hope that you create these moments for yourself. I love you all, and I hope to see you next week. Bye.